All right. Welcome to another episode of The Close-Up. I'm your host, Stephen Cameron, and today we got a really fun episode. We got my man, Philip Rossman-Reich of Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic on the show. He's awesome. We do a good deep dive, kind of like end-of-year autopsy on the regular season, the postseason, exit interview day, and kind of like some just thoughts going into the offseason. We have a really, really good conversation. I'm looking forward to y'all listening to it and checking it out. And, let us know what you think. If you agree with us, if you don't agree with us, say it in the comments, send us a shout out on X and Twitter and let us know what you think. More than happy to have that conversation with you. But I think it's really good. We talk about many different aspects of the team. We talk about different players, obviously Paolo and Franz, and what worked, what didn't work. And yeah, I'm looking forward to y'all listening to the conversation. Continue to tap into Orlando Magic HQ this offseason. We're going to have content for you coming out weekly for you still. That's not changing. I'm going to have some more deep dives on bigger offseason topics coming up soon. We're going to have a big offseason conversation about the salary cap situation and different types of players the Magic can target for trades and how they might have to maneuver this offseason. That's not necessarily this podcast. This one is more kind of like reviewing the season we just had. But there's going to be free agency and draft stuff. All that kind of stuff is coming up on our channels. So make sure you stay tuned. Subscribe. If you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe. If you're listening to this on a podcast platform, go ahead and leave us a review and subscribe to our channel there as well. And looking forward to continuing to covering this team this offseason for you all. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the conversation that I have with Philip Rossman-Reich of Locked On Magic and Orlando Magic Daily. Magic fans, like I said, we got my friend Philip Rossman-Reich on the show. You guys have heard him plenty of times on his show, Locked On Magic, and on my episodes. Philip's been a regular guest over the years. Phillips, thanks for joining the show. How are you doing tonight?
I am doing good. First Monday of freedom since the end of the season. I don't quite know what to do with my hands. But we'll get through this off season together.
I love the reference there. Yeah, we're recording this Monday, May 5th. Y'all are probably listening to it on Tuesday or Wednesday or whenever you decide to. It's odd. It's like I haven't had to watch a Magic game in a couple of days, and
it's been almost a week since the last Magic basketball game. It's a little weird not having a game the next day to prepare for.
It's been interesting mentally because you and we consume so much Magic basketball. We cover the teams, you cover them in person, so there's even more demand on you. It consumes our life, and as much as we both, like we were just talking before we hit record, we both love watching playoff basketball and stuff like that and watch it a lot. It's like there's a level of edge that just comes off when the season ends, and it's like we can breathe a little bit. Doesn't mean our job is done. We keep it going in the off season, you and I, but yeah. Today I want to talk about, kind of end of season autopsy, right? I want to talk a little bit about the regular season. I want to talk a little bit about the playoffs. We'll look ahead into the off season. We know that this team went through a lot. It was like a multi-seasoned TV show with so many different themes within each season of a season. We had the first 5 games were like, holy crap, Magic are a top 3 seed in the East. Paolo looks like an all-NBA player. This is going great. Then we had the Paolo injury. Franz held it down. We're like, whoa, something's still really magical happening, but we don't have our first player. Magical, no pun intended there. And then Franz goes down, and then just the roller coaster keeps on hitting. Wagner goes down. They're hanging on by threads, somehow still having a top 4 defense through all of this. Then later on, they get some guys back. Paolo and Franz start to come back. Then Jalen Suggs goes down with an injury. It looks like he comes back, he plays a game, gets hurt again, and then he's out for the rest of the season. Plus, there's like the normal ins and outs of other players that are just kind of like average within an NBA season. Someone getting sick, someone tweaking an ankle, missing a couple games. a guy just needing to rest on a back-to-back because they've played so much. KCP had a baby, missed a game there. Like, all sorts of things have happened through this thing, this thing called the regular season. And if you could describe the regular season in one word, what would it be?
A lot. And that's 2 words, I know. But like, you just describing all the ups and downs, all the adversity, all the things that you can't control, all the things you just frankly can't prepare for. Like,
sure,
you can have the deepest roster in the league. You can't prepare for losing your best player and then losing your second best player at the same time.
Totally.
There's just, if you would have told me at the beginning of the season that the Magic would be down their 4 best players, their 4 top scorers for more than 20 games each, and said they'd be 500, they'd be 41-41, I would have said, I'll take that running away. I'll take that and go home and be happy. Like, that's a heck of a run to stay afloat, to stay alive, to kind of stay in the race. When Paolo went out, just like Paolo, like before we even get to Franz, but when Paolo went out, I was just thinking, like, as long as the Magic are hovering around 500 by the time Paolo came back around Christmas or early January, that would be a win. That would be such a huge win. Then Franz goes out and they're hovering around 500. They're in the race. They're still in the hunt. For this team to hang on as long as they did, for this team to kind of find themselves, for this team to rally to get where they ended up being, I think that says a whole lot about this team. And I know that everyone's focused on championships, which they should be. Everyone's focused on winning, which they should be. Everyone's focused on this team progressing and growing. But I think you have to also step back and recognize that this team fought through a lot that few teams would be able to survive. And they came out of it pretty good still in the end. Obviously, I think we all can feel and sense that there's work to do. And the Magic have to do that work and have to put that work in. And, I think it's fair to say they would have had a good chance. I don't know if they would have, but they would have a good chance of accomplishing their goals if they'd stayed healthy with the way that they played when they had glimmers of health. But I think it's also fair to say they're not good enough to be where they ultimately want to be. And so I think it was just a lot. The Magic kind of had to abandon a lot of plans and a lot of things they wanted to see because they just couldn't see it. It just wasn't out on the floor. And they had to find a way to make the most of this season. And honestly, mostly, I think they did.
Yeah. I think I'm going to steal your approach with giving 2 words, even though I said we should give 1 word. And I'm going to say context matters, because the amount of times I had to have a conversation with someone who might not study the team as deeply as you and I and listeners of our shows likely, I always had to continue with back context of what is going on. A casual season person checking in with me. Why do the Magic suck right now? Well, they're missing 2 out of their 4 top players. That's why their offense is miserable. Offensive players. Well, how did they get to this point? Well, Paolo missed this starting at this game. Like, there was just so much context that's going on. And I just continually had to go back and just dig a little bit deeper, add this little bit there, add that little bit there. And I feel like that's how my conversations around this team have been so much. It's never a simple answer because there's so much context that had to go into every explanation of everything that is happening with this team. And, you could say injuries, but there's so much more to it than just injuries if you want to get down to it. All things considered, when I look at this team, though, and the injuries that they did go through, and this team, let's just lay down what happened. They went 41-41. They ended the season in the play-in tournament in the 8th spot. 7th. Thank you. And they held their own ground on 7th and beating Atlanta Hawks. And they faced the Boston Celtics in the first round. They got a game on them, but losing in 5, gentlemen's sweep, or as the starters used to call it, the douchebag sweep.
It was not a douchebag sweep.
Not this time around.
Douchebag sweep is when you win game 1 and lose the next 4.
Oh, true. That's right.
This was a pure gentleman's sweep. You won the game 3. You get your home game. You make the home crowd happy.
I'm used to the Vooch era.
Those were both douchebag sweeps.
Douchebag sweeps. You're right.
Yes.
But when I look at a team that's gone through all what they did and ended the way that they did, and then I look at other teams around the league that had major injuries like the Magic, I'm looking at teams like they were a team that brought in Paul George next to what we all assumed was a healthy Joel Embiid, considering he played in the Olympics and, ended the last season pretty healthy. Tyrese Maxey's on the team. They added a couple of, decent vets over the offseason
Added
on
the rookie of the year
minimums.
before his injury.
Yep, rookie of the year. And they went through crazy injury and they missed the play-in. They are one of the worst teams in the league. They could never find a rhythm. Then I look at a team like the New Orleans Pelicans, had a healthy Zion for a little bit. He had injuries again, but I think he came into the season healthy. Brandon Ingram, they added Dejounte Murray in the offseason. He broke his hand early into the season as well. I think like game 1, he broke his hand.
He broke his hand and then he tore his hamstring later.
Yeah, so it was just like another team. I mean, we're in an era of basketball reporting with NBAs where almost all teams kind of act like the Orlando Magic. They don't give timelines. They hardly ever give real updates nowadays, where the New Orleans Pelicans had so many injuries going on. They actually had a PR update on all the injuries that they posted publicly off the main channel to give an update on just everyone, because it was like there were so many people out. It was just like unexcusable to not say something. And it was like, a little bit vague, but they had to like do a public. I haven't seen that before in ages. So it was like, and again, that's another team that people thought were going to be, maybe not contenders like the 76ers, but a playoff team that would actually potentially look fairly decent. And yeah, they couldn't hold it together. And so when I think about the Magic having similar injury issues to those two franchises, and to see that they held, they finished the season with a top 2 defensive rating. I think at one point, like the lowest they ever dipped was like 4, but they were a top 4 defensive team the entire season, most of the time in the 2 and 3 positioning within the defensive ratings. And it allowed them to stay in games. And I just think that speaks volumes to the culture that Coach Mosley has built and the identity of types of players that we have our qualms with the front office. We will get to that in a little bit, but they built a team that could withstand injuries and still be a defensive juggernaut. And I think that's just like, I think you just kind of got to pause there and give a shout out. I mean, like,
they never
what's your
lost
thoughts
their
on
identity. That? Yeah, they never lost their identity throughout all these things. They knew what they were about and they played that way. And I think that I know a lot of people want to bang on the coach and, like find fault in individuals and like say blame and find a scapegoat. I think that's a credit to Jamal Mosley. And it just speaks to the buy-in that Jamal Mosley's gotten from his players, the identity that he has cultivated and built within this team. That, yes, they struggled. Yes, they had some really bad stretches. They had some really bad games, but they were never out of the playoff picture. They may have fallen to 9th for a little bit when the Heat were playing well, but they were never period, yeah. They had to rally to get to 7th. And honestly, like I think it feels so small, those final 18, but they had to play really good basketball to close the season out, to put themselves in 7th, to win the division, to put themselves in a great position to advance out of the play-in tournament. Again, you got to make the most of what you have. I had so many conversations with people who were so upset and wanted to like burn the whole thing down. And I'm like, okay, like we'll get there. Yes, the 7 seed isn't something to celebrate. The Southeast Division is what it is. 41-41 is nothing to celebrate. But all you can do is be the best of what you have in front of you. And I think the Magic generally did a very good job of understanding that. They couldn't go back and fix their mistakes. They couldn't go back and fix their injuries. But when push came to shove, they took the opportunities in front of them and they made the most of them. And I think that is a huge credit to Jamal Mosley and really the work that he has put in over the last 3-4 seasons since he became the coach of the Magic. They've gotten better every season until this one. And even this one, the Magic performed better as the season went on. And I think that's all you can ask for, that you're peaking toward the right time at the end of the season. That's something Mosley talks about a lot. And I think that for all the things that this team had to overcome, once they were able to get some stability, once they were able to get healthy, they showed us they have this will to win. They have this ability to we're going to go out there and we're the favorites. There's not a game that we play that we don't think we can win. I think they proved that and showed that toward the end of the season. Obviously, like, they played Boston, they made mistakes, they lost in that playoff series. They're hungry to get back. They're hungry to advance. They're not happy that that's the series that they had to play. But, I think the Magic ultimately say we showed a lot of character this season, having gone through what we went through. And that character is going to matter when we're playing at this time of year, when they're competing and playing in the second round of the playoffs and beyond.
I agree with pretty much everything you said right there. And while you were talking about that, a thought came into my mind where it's like, last year was a proof of concept kind of year, which you spoke about very well. I think I stole the words from your mouth of saying proof of concept year. And then this year was like, cool, that worked. Let's double down on it and be a little bit more aggressive. And they did. They got a very similar player of Gary Harris type that was what brought the starting unit some success last year, and tried to upgrade him with KCP. Very similar type of archetype player of Gary Harris, 3-and-D guard, but a better defender and a better shooter. And, they took that formula of a team mold and moved it into the season. And like, they maximized that formula, at least given the context of, the injuries that were with it.
They had a lot of guys not perform too. Like,
yeah.
let's not dance around it.
No, I'm not. But they I'll circle to that in a second.
Okay.
It's a big picture right here that I'm throwing. And like, they maximized what they could as far as defensively with that formula. Offensively, we had questions about it last year, and I think the questions got bigger this year for me coming into the season, because we lost so much ball handling with losing Markelle Fultz, losing Joe Ingles, and putting that trust into a player like Anthony Black and Jalen Suggs, and kind of hoping that was going to be enough. And we kind of learned it wasn't enough. We had Corey Joseph, who was brought in to kind of be a bench cheerleader, who I think they signed, with if he's going to play, we believe he would. And ultimately he played pretty well come the down the stretch, but he wasn't come in to be a regular rotation player, right?
People ask me why they signed Corey Joseph. I said, he's a good veteran. He's going to, be a good mentor to guys. And I was like, look, if he's playing, that means
all hell's
something
broken
went terribly
loose.
wrong.
And
that was true. Like, something went terribly wrong. He had to play.
But I think we've, the front office now, and they've kind of admitted it in exit interviews, they've learned that their formula offensively needs adjusting. And I think that's totally fair. Earlier, you mentioned about like certain things, experiments that they wanted to see this season. They didn't really get to see. Like, the biggest one that stands out is people are talking about wanting to add more ball handling in the starting unit. Well, the ball handler that they envisioned didn't get to play with the two main players more than 6 games. And one of those games was like 2 months apart from the first 5. And so like that experiment
97 total minutes
didn't flush out whatsoever. Yeah, 97 total minutes. That's obnoxious. Like, that is not enough of a sample size to have any idea if Jalen Suggs is a good fit as a primary ball handler next to Paolo and Franz, and if they need to upgrade to a more dominant ball handler in the guard rotation and, move KCP to the bench. Like, maybe they have that answer. I couldn't tell you if they do or not, because like, we didn't get to see Jalen Suggs next to those guys and play more than 97 minutes, which is just like, it's an experiment we didn't get to see. What are other experiments or concepts that you think the front office wanted to see, but they didn't get to see?
I mean, obviously the Jalen Suggs one is the biggest, because that was the biggest kind of risk. That was kind of the biggest. We're handing this responsibility to Jalen Suggs, and we want to see what that looks like. And look, like, I don't think as the Magic need more ball handling, they need more creation. Like, I think the playoffs revealed that Paolo and Franz have to do way too much. They have to find ways to, like, they don't have to take all the easy shots, but you have to get some easy shots. It's like Paolo and Franz aren't going to lose the ball. Like, the Magic don't want a point guard that's directing traffic and just eating up possessions. They're not looking for Trae Young. They're not looking for, like a John Morant or LaMelo Ball who have to have the ball in their hands. They don't want those guys. They want guys that can play off of Paolo and Franz just as well as they can play with the ball in their hands. So I think the Magic wanted to see that play out a little bit more. And now they're going to have to decide, well, is this worth continuing, or, do we have to go get that guy and just kind of see if this whole thing meshes well. I think, we didn't get to see the full force of a Jalen Suggs, Contavious Caldwell-Pope backcourt defensively.
Right.
A lot of these experiments are like Jalen Suggs stuff. Like Jalen Suggs struggled from three, but a lot of that was because he was taking pull-up threes as the main ball handler instead of getting kickouts. Like I think in those first 5 games, he shot like 42% on like 8 catch and shoot 3-point attempts. Like he was the volume shooter the Magic were desperately looking for. And so maybe that is, we didn't get to see that Jalen Suggs because he had to create everything else. Like he, very quickly after Paolo's injury, he was the second guy. And then very quickly after that, he was the first guy. He was the only guy. And so, I think the Magic they didn't get to see everyone in their proper roles. Like I mentioned earlier, like, I think there is a good chance, the Magic would at least been competitive to accomplish their goals, like win home court advantage, be the 4 seed, get to the second round. I'm no offense to Indiana. I think Orlando when healthy is just as good as Indiana. Is certainly capable of playing Indiana. Like I had people texting me during the Pacers-Cavs game saying like, this is why the Magic need to be more like the Pacers. And I'm just like, I'm sorry. I think the Magic beat the Pacers in a 7-game series when they're healthy. I don't think the Magic need to be like the Pacers. The Magic need to be like themselves. To me, they're honest. Like, again, no offense to Pacers fans. I think the Magic beat the Pacers in a 7-game series. I think they're better than them. Again, that's kind of just a good matchup for Orlando. Orlando is like the only team that knows how to slow Indiana down.
Sure.
That's part of it too. Like Indiana's a better team this year. They had a very good season. I'm not sitting here saying otherwise, but Orlando's in that conversation. They're in that tier of teams in the East when they're healthy, and we just didn't get to see what this team looks like at full force. It's even Mo Wagner's injury. One of the biggest superpowers for this Magic team was their bench. They were 4th or 5th in the league in bench scoring at the time of Mo Wagner's injury. They dropped down to like 20, and obviously like other injuries played a role in that too. But you lost your most consistent scorer off the bench, someone who, like Jamal Mosley would always say, falls out of bed and scores 10 points.
Yeah.
Like they missed him a ton.
He played 30 games this year.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're not going to see him again until Christmas. Like,
yep.
Just maybe early December, maybe, but if he's still on the roster, he's not going to play till Christmas.
And even then it's going to take him a little bit of time to kind of find himself again.
It takes a full year to come back from the ACL injury to begin. It takes a full year to come back from an ACL injury and then another full year to get yourself all the way back. Like, I don't know for how deep into future conversations we're going to go. Don't be shocked if the Magic decline that team option, sign him to a new deal. Like like give him some long-term security again. I don't think he wants to do that. I don't envision him being in another jersey next year. He's going to play for the Magic next year. But like they missed so many things. They had to figure so many things out on the fly. They had to lean on Tristan da Silva. They put a lot on Anthony Black's plate. And I think he struggled with that a little bit.
It was a big jump in responsibilities from what he was asked to do last year to this year. Big jump. There was moments that looked great and moments that were like, dude, you need someone else next to you.
You're a 19-year-old, 20-year-old. Yeah. Like they bet big on Anthony Black, and like he was okay. Like he was just okay.
And that second unit the year prior, like it was they had Anthony Black that played sometimes, but like it didn't just like replace Markelle Fultz, who played a lot with Anthony Black. They also lost Joe Ingles, who was an excellent secondary ball handler and decision maker. And so you're losing that, and you're replacing him with,
essentially Gary Harris. 2
great ball handlers, going to a 20-year-old sophomore in Anthony Black, and guys like Gary Harris who they're not ball handlers. I mean, he can dribble a little bit, but he's not a playmaker. He can make a smart pass, but he's not someone who's setting up the offense.
He's still learning how to work on the ball. He's not a point guard. Like that's what they wanted him to be, and he's not a point guard. Not in the NBA,
so
at least.
that hurt a lot too. And I think, that was a big question. Will this team have enough ball handling that I had going into it? And I think we know the answer very clearly is no. Doesn't mean they have to make some crazy changes, but they definitely need to add to the ball handling. And then guys, like if they're going to keep Anthony Black, he's got to take a leap next year with his on-ball creation for him. Jalen Suggs got to prove that he can do it too. And I think they both showed glimpses in their games of being good decision makers and being good offensive table setters, but Anthony Black's got to get more consistent on when to score versus when to be passive. Jalen Suggs has to. I think what I saw is they have to play a very simple offensive system with these guys running the ball because they're not capable of running more complex systems.
I mean, they're young. It's just like, it's learning. It's
Totally.
And like the difference, like I was having this conversation with people earlier today, Anthony Black kind of divisive around the fan base. Like some people are like, we're ready to include him in a trade that makes us better. Some people are like, no, we got to keep him. He's going to be really, really good. And it's just like, the point I made to people is like, look, if like, there's a lot of things I really like about Anthony Black. If this were a 30-win team, I'd say start him. Let's live with the mistakes. He's going to need the mistakes. This is a 45 to 50 win team. They cannot live with those mistakes. He's got to develop off the bench. And, you could say, oh, that's a 6th pick. He should be starting by now. That A, that's not how it works. And B, that's not the player he is. We can debate that the quality of that draft pick, but next year's a big year. He's going to have to deliver because, Jeff Weltman has made it clear as he's ever made it. This team needs to win now. It's no longer waiting around. It's no longer we're developing. It's no longer a rebuild. It's time to win. It's time to make it out of the first round. You're judged on results now more than, oh, you got better year over year. And it's not about that anymore. It's about, oh, we won. We made the second round. That's a good season. We won, but we lost in the first round again. Well, that's not a good season anymore.
When kind of putting a bow on the regular season, you can answer this yes or no. You can answer it 1 through 10. But in general, however you want to answer it, was the regular season successful, in your opinion?
Yes, I think it was.
Context matters.
Context matters. Like I said, I give this team a lot of credit for how they closed the season.
Yeah.
When they went 1-6 on that homestand, they could have broken apart. It could have been over. The whole project could have ended. Guys could have gone on their own. They could have stopped listening to coach. That was a gut check moment. And to go 12-6 to get to 500, and really it's 12. It's 11-5 because the last 2 games didn't matter. But to go 12-6 and get back to 500, win your division, that told me a lot about what this team is made of and what this team's culture is about. Ultimately, I think the most important thing that we learned from this season is Paolo, Banchero, and Franz Wagner are all NBA level players.
Yeah.
And I think, certainly we thought Paolo was going to get there. We didn't know how quickly he was going to get there, but we thought he was going to get there. Franz, I think everyone believed, he could be a great sidekick, but the way that he played this season, even with the things he struggled with, showed us, no, this guy's a star in his own right. This guy is not just a sidekick. He is a, 1A, 1B. Like, these are 2 guys, this is the best duo of players the Magic have had since Shaq and Penny. Like, all due respect to T-Mac and Grant Hill, who never really played together. All due respect to Dwight and Jameer, or Dwight and Hito, or whichever combo of those players you want to put together. Paolo and Franz are, they're in the Shaq and Penny conversation as far as what they've done together for this franchise.
Totally. I mean, you have one that's averaging 25 points per game to end the season, almost 26. The other one that's averaging 24. It's like, both that can dribble, pass, and shoot.
30 and 25.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's these guys. If you're exiting the season knowing one thing, and this was like my goal for the playoffs, because we knew Boston was going to be really, really tough. Did I think the Magic would be competitive? Did I think the Magic would be more competitive? Yes. But they were always going to be very, very tough for this team. And I was like, the only thing I want to know coming out of the series is that these 2 guys will show up in the playoffs, will be able to beat good defense, because Boston's a very good defense, and be the kind of players that we can actually build a championship team around. And I think, if it wasn't clear before, and maybe it was, and I'm not giving enough credit, it is abundantly clear now the Magic have 2 dudes. And everything else you can figure out. But they got the 2 dudes. And to me, that makes this season at least partially a success. Because they were both all-stars this year. If it weren't for the injuries, they would have both had a very strong case to be all-stars.
Totally. Absolutely.
And that's that's the kind of level of player we're talking about now. And so now it's just about give them the guys that make their jobs easier, stay healthy, and go from there. So I don't think the Magic are very far from being a really good team, like an elite title contending team. They're not very far. It's going to take the right moves, and you can't mess it up. But they're in a really good spot, in a really good position. I think the Magic, I don't think Jeff Weltman is conservative by nature. I don't think he would have said what he said and been so clear of we're ready to win if it wasn't like 100% true. Like it is. And so I don't
he's
think,
so conservative. I mean, this is like a completely different tone he has ever spoken before about this team.
Never spoken that clearly and succinctly. And like everyone's wondering, what does an aggressive Jeff Weltman look like? Because, like he hasn't been the most assertive on the trade market. We're about to find out.
He, most of the time when you listen to a Jeff Weltman interview, it feels like he's speaking in code and you have to like dissect a lot of things. And like this time it was like, no, it's pretty darn clear what he wants to
He's good at
tell.
sticking to his talking points. And look, this was his talking point for the day, for the exit interviews, was like, this is what we're going to say. We're going to stick to that message. Anthony Parker copied that message on his interviews. Jamal Mosley copied some of that message on his interview. Everyone senses like, no, this team is ready. We don't need to handle this team with kid gloves anymore.
Yeah.
They're ready. Let's go get it.
Not to get too deep into exit interviews, because I do want to talk about that a little bit deeper here in a minute, but just my quick thoughts on the regular season being a success. I say yes, but again, with like kind of circling back to how I described it in the beginning, context matters. I wouldn't say yes if they were healthy. I'm only saying yes because they were injured and they fought through a lot of diversity, holding the culture that was built with being probably the third most injured team in the league and maintained a playoff position and a top 3 defense the entire season. Like that to me is successable. Because if you look at other teams that had the same types of injuries, they didn't make the playoffs. And
didn't even get close.
They didn't even get close. No other team lost the amount of players that the Magic did that are that important to the lineup and made the playoffs or were even thoughts. I say yes, but again, context matters. I don't want to go too deep. It was only 5 games, but I do want to talk about the playoffs specifically for a few minutes here. And then we'll circle back to exit interviews. Magic, they matched up on the 2-7 seed matchup with the Boston Celtics, who were the championships team last year. The Boston Celtics were a top 4 or top 5 defense and offensive team in both categories. I think they were number 2 in offense, and I think
second in offense,
4
fifth in defense, I think,
or 5th in defense.
Fifth,
yeah, something like that. And
they're a championship level team.
Yeah, championship level. There was moments where they, you could see they were taking the gas off the pedal a little bit and just kind of coasting throughout the season here and there, but they know how to turn it on. I've told people I like the matchup between the Magic and the Celtics, but even if people are saying if the Magic were healthy, they would have beaten the Celtics. Well, the Celtics weren't healthy either, and they were super banged up. It probably would have been a lot more competitive. Probably would have gotten to seven games, but
Suggs and Mo were worth at least 1 game.
Yeah, but you're not getting. There's levels to this, and the Magic are getting there, even if healthy, but they're not there yet. And so I think we kind of mentioned this earlier. My biggest takeaway is Paolo and Franz are those dudes in the playoffs. We knew Paolo was from last year. We had question marks on if Franz was going to be it this year. He had a couple decent moments and a couple nice games in last year's playoffs, but there were like 2 out of the 7 games.
Like way up and down. Yeah. Just way up and
even
down.
last year, like there was moments where he showed up versus, in the regular season, showed up great versus, not 500 teams, and then, kind of disappeared a little bit in the teams versus the 500 offensively. And like this year, he answered that call. Like you mentioned, Paolo averaged 29 points per game. He averaged 8 rebounds per game, 4 assists. Franz averaged 25, almost 26 points, 25.8. So 26 points per game, almost 5 rebounds and, 5.5 assists a game. And both played very well defensively. I think Paolo led in so many categories. Like he led in scoring. He was second in rebounding. He didn't lead in that, but it's like they were just insane performers in these playoffs. And I think that's just like they proved that, like you mentioned earlier, these are the guys worth building around. What guys can you deal with their projections to grow? Like, can Anthony Black be a part of this team? maybe it depends on what this front office thinks his projection of growth will be. If they think it's going to be too much longer, I don't even know if next season is worth it. If the right trade comes around, I'm not giving him up for just anything, but like, I'm not necessarily keeping him off the table this summer either right now, love you, Jonathan Isaac, but like you were okay in the playoffs, but you weren't like what we all think you should be in the playoffs.
We're dancing around the thing here. We're just dancing around the thing here. The Magic's defensive rating wasn't great in the series, but they were good enough defensively to keep themselves in all 5 of those games. Like game 1, they had a bad third quarter. Game 1 and 2 and game 5, they had bad third quarters, and game 5 was its own thing. But games 1 and 2, like they had a little bit of a defensive lapse in the third quarter that cost them a chance to win those games and made those games essentially non-competitive.
Right.
The defense wasn't the problem. Orlando had an excellent defensive game plan. They took away all of Boston's 3-pointers, essentially. They are a good chunk of them. They made Boston a mid-range shooting team. They dared Boston to beat them one-on-one, and the Celtics just didn't want to do it. They kept trying to hunt those threes and kind of fell into Orlando's traps, and they were physical, and they were bumping, and they were fouling, or just kind of like doing everything they could to disrupt the rhythm of the game. But ultimately, the Magic lost because their offense isn't good enough.
Yeah.
Like Paolo and Franz are, we're generating everything and we're scoring a lot, but every time they kicked out, shooters didn't make shots. And like intense series like this, you got to make shots. When Orlando made mistakes, Boston made them pay almost every time. Whether it's game 1, 2, and 5 for sure. Game 4, Boston won a close game. Like that was probably the best back and forth game of the series. Tied with 4 minutes to go. Boston played the better 4 minutes. They won the game. The Magic, just every time Boston made a mistake, if Boston went through a long offensive drought, Orlando couldn't consistently make them pay. Like when Boston committed turnovers or when the Magic got offensive rebounds, they couldn't consistently make them pay. And that's the difference right now between the Magic and these elite teams. Because Orlando's defense is good enough to keep them in any game. But if you can't take advantage of that good defense, if you can't create mistakes and take advantage of them, you don't have a chance against Boston because they're going to make you pay for every single one of your mistakes. And so that's where like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope going 0 for 6 on wide open threes, all wide open threes in game 2. Like that you brought Kentavious Caldwell-Pope in for that game, for that spot, and he didn't deliver. To go 8 for 32 in game 4 or game 5 or whatever it was. Like you're not winning games against the Celtics shooting that poorly. Boston's going to get 53. Boston wants to get 53s up. They make 15 of them. That's a bad percentage, but they're still making 15 threes. Orlando knew they didn't have the horses to keep up with them, so they had to get those 3-point attempts down, but they needed to make threes. They needed to make shots. They needed to generate some scoring and some offensive push to be competitive. And that is still the big takeaway is the Magic's offense is just not good enough right now.
They couldn't do it in the regular season. There was no way they were going to do it versus the Boston Celtics. It goes to show, like, when you look at the stats for the playoffs, it's like there was 3 people that scored that averaged double digits. Paolo, Franz, and Wendell Carter averaged 10.
Shout out Dell. He
had a good series.
He had a very good series.
I am a Dell fan right now. He proved a lot to me after that injury when he came back. He looked a little rough, I've been up and down on him. Like,
look, the shooting wasn't where it needs to be this year.
Yeah,
like no one's going to deny that.
His defense was so solid and underrated.
His defense was the linchpin for the Magic to have any success. They would have been swept if Wendell Carter wasn't their center. Like they would have had no shot defending the Celtics.
Very well. Back to the offense. The next highest scorer after Wendell Carter was Anthony Black at 8 points per game. And then it's like it jumps to 5.
Yeah.
To Corey Joseph and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. And it's just like you're not going to win versus the Celtics about that. So you were at exit interview day. And you got to be around for, I imagine, pretty much everyone. And we've all heard certain sound bites, particularly the one about Jeff Weltman saying, they're going to start making win now moves. They're in a mindset where they're willing to sacrifice defense for offense. What, when you kind of like collectively take all of them in, how do you think the team and the front office kind of is feeling about what they learned from this past season and what they are going into the offseason with?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of growing up that happened this season. I think there is a realization that this isn't inevitable and this isn't easy. It isn't easy to do it again. I think there was, I think Paolo was the first one to really say it. Like, we thought it was going to be kind of just like last year, yeah, there'd be ups and downs, but we'd be able to kind of copy what we did last year, grow and be better from there. And I think this was the season. Ultimately, it's going to be good for everybody. That's still with the team and part of the team when they're at their peak, because I think it made them realize that you have to work for everything. Like, there's no running it back and it all just picks up where you left off. It's you have to work for everything you get. And so I think that was one of the big lessons for this young team was nothing's promised, nothing's guaranteed. Everything is earned in this league. And the Magic were good enough that they could keep themselves afloat, but they are, as much as I think they're proud of their resilience, they see both sides of the coin of this season. They're really proud of how they came through, how they pushed through, how they stayed together, how they finished the season, all those things. But they're ultimately disappointed that the season ended in 5 games, that they got eliminated in the first round. They're disappointed they still didn't accomplish their goals. They don't, no player uses injuries as an excuse. They're proud of how they fought back against all that, but they're ultimately not satisfied with where the season ends. And so ultimately, I think that's a good thing because they have high expectations on themselves and they didn't meet it. And so the question is, how do you respond to that? How do you come back from that? And so I think that was the general vibe is like, yes, this group is probably done as we know them. They're going to have to make some changes and some pretty significant changes, but there's still a belief in the overall project. And they now know they have to work that much harder to make this project work.
Looking at the offseason, we know they are projecting to be a first apron team. They're going to have to get under that. I don't think it's too hard, but they have to. They likely are not going to want to operate as in the first apron, is my guess. I think even was it Weltman that said like that's kind of a badge of honor or something like that.
You have to earn it.
Yeah, you have to earn that. They haven't earned it yet, in my perspective. And we know that he's also said, it's time.
You can't be aggressive and win now and cut salary. That's really hard to do.
Yeah, I guess that's my question. Like, knowing that they're trying to win and that they have to make some significant roster changes to improve the offense, and also knowing that they might have a mandate from the powers above that says, we're not quite ready to be there yet financially. Do it one more year under, and then we'll talk. What do you think? What do you think they're thinking? It's like, we talk about a shakeup, but what does that actually look like? We know Paolo and Franz are not going anywhere. Jalen Suggs probably is not going anywhere. But like, who do you think are the biggest names that are potentially not coming back next year? I mean, I have my thoughts, but I'd love to hear yours.
I think that they're going to be open to all opportunities.
Sure.
Like, if your name is not Paolo, Banchero, Franz, Wagner, Jalen Suggs, they're going to talk about you. They're going to be talking about you to other teams. They'd be silly not to. I don't think, understanding the current cap climate, Paolo Banchero is getting his max. So they're going to be a first apron team at the very least next season, the 2027 season. Because the cap is climbing so much, we're going to be seeing 10% increases in the salary cap, the maximum 10% increase here for the foreseeable future. I don't think the Magic are scared of being a first apron team this year. Like, if they have to be a first apron team because their books, they started aligning their books to the new cap reality before the new cap reality hit, then they're okay with that. Because again, they have to add to this team. Like, they can't just sit still. They can't just sit on their hands. They have to add to this team.
I agree, but we also heard like Anthony Parker say it's like this is more about trading than adding.
Yes, It's so
because
the
of
way,
their like that was a direct
the way-
response to the
the
cap
way-
situation.
Yeah, the way the Magic made their books last year was they slotted guys into salaries that they liked, that they felt comfortable with. And so it's like Jeff said on Exit Interview Day, it's about swapping those salaries. It's about taking, if Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is not the guy they want to retain, it's taking his $22 million and turning that into another $22 million. It's taking Cole Anthony, who's at 13, 14 million, into another 13, $14 million player. That's, I think, more in line of what they're trying to do. So all of those people who are like, the Magic should go get Trae Young, they should go get LaMelo Ball, they should go get John Morant, they should, be involved in the Giannis trade. That's going to be really tough to do because those are $40 million players.
Right.
The Magic don't want to be a second apron team. I can guarantee you they are not ready.
Yeah,
for
they're not looking at max players.
Yeah, they're not adding the marquee guys. Their marquee guys are set. Paolo and Franz are their marquee. I don't think they're ready to trade Jalen Suggs. I don't think anyone is really giving much for Jalen Suggs. He has to prove he's healthy, and that's a fair criticism of him.
Absolutely.
And the contract that they gave him. That contract is front-loaded, so his highest salary is next season. So again, a reason why I think they're okay, like being a slightly above the first apron. So, who do the Magic have to trade then? Well, I think they will be shopping Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. I think they'll try. I think they'll be open to trading Wendell Carter, but I don't think they will. That contract's just going to be really tough to move.
I also think it's kind of hard to find a clear upgrade that fits the defensive identity they want to keep.
And there's just not a lot of centers out there. Like the Lakers, like I was on a podcast with the Locked On Lakers guys. Before we logged off, they both asked me like, "Hey, what's the deal with Wendell Carter?" And I was like, "Oh no, I'm happy to tell you." Like they were like asked me like, "Is he a good lob threat?" And I was like, "Well, not quite, but do I have a Goga Batadze to sell you?"
Yeah.
And I was like, well, we'll be in touch. We're going to talk about these guys. Don't worry. You guys are on my list of guys that I want to talk to. So I think that the Magic are very likely to trade Goga Batadze. He's out of rotation. You don't need to be paying $8 million for a guy that's out of the rotation.
He's a very expensive third stringer.
Yes. I think that they will ultimately decline the team option for Gary Harris, but if they pick that up, that probably means they're getting ready to trade him. They need him for a trade.
Yep.
I think Corey Joseph's probably gone as much as we love Kojo.
They'll find another vet minimum.
You can find another end of the bench. Yeah, you can find another end of the bench point guard. But ultimately, I think the Magic's ability to make a trade is the same thing that probably kept them from making a trade at the trade deadline, and that's Anthony Black. Anthony Black is the highest upside guy on the team that the Magic might be willing to part with. He might be the guy that they have to give up to grease the wheels for the guy they really, really want. Whether, again, that's Anthony Simons, whether that's like Colin Sexton, whoever, whether it's Austin Reeves, whoever it might be, it feels like the league wants the Magic to move Anthony Black. They weren't ready to do it in February. Who knows if they're ready to do it now? And I think there's a fair debate on both sides of that discussion.
Sure. Yeah.
Why you would do it. And really, again, it matters more who are you doing it for? Is that player worth it? And then you got your draft picks coming in and you got to figure that part out too.
It's always about the return.
It's always about the return. It's nice to hypothetically say, oh, make this guy available. It's like, well, it's like what Jeff said. The kind of players they were looking for at the deadline were more rentals, and the cost of those rentals were too high or too rich for them. And so they were happy sticking with what they had. If they knew Jalen Suggs was out for the year, they might have changed that tune. That price may have been worth it for them. It wasn't worth it for them then, but it might be now. And that I think is a big part of it.
What's your thought process on the longest Magic tenured player and Jonathan Isaac, specifically in response to, the thoughts about, we're going to sacrifice defense for offense, because that is a guy who is a negative offensively, but is a positive defensively mostly, and kind of had a mixed bag, but, a decent year. To me, when I hear that tone of defense for offense, that's like the very first name that comes to mind.
Yeah, I think that if I'm the Magic, you better be giving me a lot for Jonathan Isaac. I really think this team is still very invested in him. I said this, it's probably not as true as it was when I first said this, but Jonathan Isaac still has an elite skill set. Like, he is still one of the best defenders in the league. And I don't think you enter a summer saying we're definitely trading that. The return better be good. And the Magic probably still value Jonathan Isaac more than the rest of the league wants to value him. If it's necessary for that one player you need, he's $15 million now. I know a lot of people were like, we're paying $25 million for a guy who can't make a three and admitted that he's sluggish, admitted that he made a mistake in his offseason program. They paid $25 million for that last year. That's a fair criticism. Isaac would be the first to tell you he did not have a good season. He said that he said that publicly several times. You either believe in him or you don't. Like, it's like so many of these questions are like, you either believe in him or you don't.
Yeah.
And if you believe in him, then you're very hesitant to move him. If you don't believe him, you'll be like, sure, take what you can get, go get something of value. Like, don't just give him away, but take what you can get. I am still a believer that Jonathan Isaac's defensive skill set is just so valuable. It's game changing. His versatility is still something that you can deploy. And the problem with the Magic is they had too many guys who are just bad on offense. And so it makes everybody look worse on offense when everyone's bad at offense. If Jonathan Isaac is the only non-shooter in the lineup or the only difficult offensive player in the lineup, all of a sudden he looks a lot better. And you can deal with him maybe missing a shot or two because he's giving you so much on defense, you can make up for it elsewhere. When he's in a lineup with Joe Ingles and Mo Wagner and Cole Anthony last year, or 2 seasons ago now, he looked fine. Jonathan admitted that he made a mistake in his offseason program. I take him at his word. He's going to spend a lot more time on the court this summer. I think he'll be back. He'll come back a better player and look more like the Jonathan Isaac that we recognize and need. And I think that'll ultimately make him more valuable to the Magic.
My tone has shifted so much on Jonathan Isaac this year. I'm one of those people that's kind of out on him. You said he is a game-changing defensive player, and 2 seasons ago he was. This season, I can't count maybe more than two hands how many games he actually was game-changing. Because
this season
he played 71 games, but he played only 1,000 minutes.
Yes.
So it was so low,
This season, defensively, he was just good very good.
Yeah, he was fine.
And not elite.
Yeah.
And I agree 100% with Jonathan Isaac's offensive shortcomings. He must be elite to play.
Yeah.
And
I'm just man, that hits that nail in the head, as far as offense for defense.
J.I. was the first to tell us that his conditioning was not where he wanted it to be in the offseason. The Magic and him made the decision to put on all the weight. They thought they were going to play more at center. They want him to put on the weight, be a little bit more durable, to take some hits. And in that sense, it was correct. He had another healthy season. He played 76 games. He took those hits. He was fine, but it took away his speed. It took away his anticipation. It took away a lot of those kind of fast twitch things that just make him such an elite player. And so that was a mistake. Isaac admitted it. And now he's going to go back, and now we'll see what he does.
He collected DMPs this year.
No, he's out of the rotation. He didn't miss games because of injury. He missed games early in the season because of injury.
He played 71 games. Yeah, he had a couple of things, but nothing major.
But he admitted he made a mistake in how he played. And look, Orlando at the end of the day needed offense more than they needed defense, and that's why he didn't. That's why he was in and out of the rotation. Ultimately, he was the backup center. He was the backup center in the playoffs. And he did okay, not great, but he did okay. But again, you need Isaac to be elite defensively, and he wasn't elite defensively this year. I'm a supporter. I think the Magic should keep him. I think they should stay invested in him. He wasn't anywhere near what they needed this year, 100%. And that does expose him to potentially be traded, especially because of how flexible his contract can be. It is a good salary that can get you something. So again, I'm not here to tell you to believe or not to believe. Yeah. You either believe or believe. You either believe or you don't. And if you don't believe, move him.
The reason why I brought him up was directly after Anthony Black, because you said Anthony Black was a player where it's kind of the blue chip player. But then I'm thinking of what other players actually have value, or that another team might see, hey, maybe we can turn that into something. And that's another name that comes to mind.
Look, the bad thing that came out of this season is so many players had bad seasons.
Something was in the water.
Had a bad year. Cole Anthony he got better as the year went on, but he's not a playoff guy.
He had a Cole Anthony year.
He had a Cole Anthony season. Jonathan Isaac had a bad year. Wendell Carter had a bad year. All the guys that the Magic wanted to have available for these kinds of trades did not play well. And so the Magic are going to have to grease the wheels. They're going to need to include picks. They're going to need to, I don't think they should be throwing all their picks at one guy. I don't think they should be spending 3 first-round picks on Anthony Simons or anything. But that 16th and 25th pick, they're going to have to be willing to include those to get the kind of players that they need to
Absolutely.
say, hey, if you're going to take Kentavious Caldwell-Pope's contract, here's a first round pick for your trouble. Or if you're, or, you know, or we might have to take, or the Magic might have to say, you know, we're going to take this decent player maybe who's on a bad contract to help grease the wheels a little bit. Like I've seen people pitch a Simons and Ayton deal for Orlando that would cost them like Wendell Carter and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope or Cole Anthony or Anthony Black or something like that. And that might be the cost of doing business, that you have to take on a bad contract and sit with an albatross around your neck. Now you want that player to still be like valuable. Like, you know, I wrote today about the Pistons and the rebuild they did and the quick rebuild they did of their offense. A big part of that was they acquired Tim Hardaway Jr., who is coming off a major injury season. Nobody knew if he still had it. They took that gamble. They got 3 second-round picks for the trouble. They took that gamble, and it paid off really well for them. The Magic might have to take that kind of a risk somewhere. And that, you know, at this stage, that could make or break a lot of things for this team.
Yeah. It's going to be an interesting summer because we're going to see
They're
some
going to have
future.
to make decisions on guys.
Yeah.
They're going to have to make decisions.
They have to make decisions on guys finally.
That's what it comes down
they
to.
can't run it back, and they're going to have to give up some future assets within these decision makings if they want to actually truly improve. But, you know, like Bobby Mark said, they have the NBA golden contracts with multiple contracts between $2 and $22 million. So they have a lot of flexibility. Most of them are pretty short term. A lot of them have team options on them.
Yeah.
You know, most of them are all expiring in 1 to 2 years. So, you know, there's a couple longer ones like Jonathan Isaacs is a little bit longer, but there's some like games played tied within the contract for season. So there's a couple outs there if he were to ever get injured again and whatnot. So, I mean, I hope he doesn't. I want him to have, I would love for him to be the player we saw 2 years ago for what it's worth if he's still around. Like, I can still see that being there in some place, but, you know, it's going to be a different team. I'm kind of looking forward to it. I messaged like a group of friends recently and I was like, I'm actually excited that Jeff Weltman said things are going to change because I'm ready for a change. It's been a good couple of years, but I'm ready to see this team finally level up offensively because we haven't seen them level up offensively successfully in a very long time. I do think they tried to get better offensively last summer by adding Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, but that, you know, the experiment didn't work, unfortunately, for who knows if it was the water in Orlando needs to be checked or if it's really just a combination of odd roster construction and just weird luck that goes into that.
Like,
and
don't
injuries too.
Underestimate how much the injuries threw everybody off.
Oh, sure.
Especially that early in the year.
Yep. So it's interesting, man. But Philip, we've been running for an hour and we could keep talking, but at this point, I think we all need a little rest, and you are doing a great job doing deep dives on the season and the off season. And, we will continue to do that over here at Orlando Magic HQ. Philip, I appreciate you coming on the show. Go ahead and let everyone know where you're at, what you got working on. And, thank you.
Yeah, no, the best place to find my work is over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can find my podcast at Locked On Magic. To subscribe wherever you download podcasts. We're also on YouTube, so you can see me record the podcast. It's not as exciting as it sounds, but yeah, that's the best place to find me. I am still 5 days a week on Locked On Magic until the end of free agency, until really the end of July, early August. August is when we go to 3 days a week for about a month and a half. Still a lot going on, still a lot to talk about. I am dissecting the season bit by bit, starting to work on some off-season stuff as well. So, you know, we'll get to June, we'll get to July, and then we'll see where we're at. So lots going to happen between then and there.
Hardest worker in the NBA right here is Philip Rossman-Reich. Don't know how you do it, man. I definitely couldn't. I can hardly do 1 day a week of podcasting. You're doing it 5. Shout out. Fans, thanks for tuning in to another episode. Philip, thank you so much once again for joining. I'm sure this will not be the last time we talk this off season. And let's go Magic.
Yep. See it. Let's go Magic. Let's play the song.
Play the song.